I was just looking forward to a nice, quiet Tuesday, and no, we didn't see this coming. We were focused on all the action at Memorial last week. We were focused on Jack Nicklaus and Rory McIlroy, and we got a little, Scotty Scheffler coming in there and a great tournament. And 48 hours later, the world of men's professional golf is completely been turned upside down by this. And I think that there were probably less than a dozen people in the world that knew that this was going to happen. And they played it very, very close to the vest. Usually we get a little inkling or we get a feel that something's going to take place like this. I mean, this is really big news, and to keep really big news quiet to this level is unfortunately impressive. But no, it's basically everybody who was yelling at everybody else for being anti-competitive, for being on the wrong side of moral arguments, for being greedy. Everybody is now hugging over a great big Brinks truck of money.
And on the other side of it, the people who were yelling about monopoly, it's a monopoly, and they went and joined the monopoly.
Yeah, I mean, the monopoly thing to me never held water because players were free to leave the PGA Tour if they wanted and to join LIV. There were consequences to that. And players who signed on with LIV knew that. The agents who guided them for a fee to those tours knew that. So people who wanted to join, who were offered opportunities, were able to take it. So if that's the case, how could it be anti-competitive and monopolistic? But you're right. Now you could argue, I don't know what the other tour is or the other entity on this global stage that would be on the outside of this new monopoly, but you've got the DP World Tour, which is essentially the old European tour. So they run events throughout Asia, Europe, Africa, Australia. You've got the PGA Tour, which does a sprinkling of global stuff, but primarily is the United States. This week, ironically, got the Canadian Open. They'll run a couple of events in the Caribbean and Mexico. And now you've got LIV, which has had a world tour, but where they're essentially only playing like once a month or so. They're all joining into one. And so, yeah, that sounds pretty like a monopoly to me, huh?
Is it going to be 72 holes? Are we going to have the silly, stupid team names?
We don't know. A lot of this stuff, like right now, I think that what we do know is that changes are obviously afoot, that a lot of the different parties that were at war with each other all the legal stuff is now fallen away. Like all that stuff is gone. The litigation on the part of the PGA Tour against LIV and the Public Investment Fund, that's gone. And the countersuits, the Public Investment Fund and PIF and the Saudi government suing the PGA Tour, that's gone. The format for exactly how the golf will be played is a little bit yet to be determined. We do know, it sounds like, that players who were suspended by the PGA Tour, who relinquished their membership to the PGA Tour to join LIV, they will be allowed a roadmap essentially to rejoin in a reasonably quick amount of fashion, I would imagine, to rejoin the PGA Tour. So right now, technically, Dustin Johnson, Phil Mickelson, Bubba Watson, Brooks Koepka, they are not PGA Tour members. I would be shocked if all four of them were not PGA Tour members a year from right now, and they will be playing in PGA Tour events. I would suspect they'll be playing LIV Tour events, whatever that sort of morphs into. But it sounds like the team element of that stuff, again, this is so early, will still be around somehow, and that players will be able to bop back and forth between the tours.
How does PGA leadership go about trying to fix this with the rank and file that stayed in the PGA and carried the banner for the PGA while giving up an opportunity at big money?
How do you look Rory in the eye?
Square that circle?
I don't know how Jay Monahan looks at Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy and about a half a dozen other guys. John Rahm is in that conversation. Max Homa is in that conversation. Jordan Spieth, Justin Thomas. How you look at them and say, this ends up being a good deal for us. We're doing the right thing. You should be on board with this, because that is about as disingenuous. Either he was not being truthful for the last year plus, or he wouldn't be truthful in that conversation. You can't have it both ways. I was given, like other members of the media, a 3-page release this morning. It was emailed at 10 o'clock on the dot. Nowhere in this does it say anything about human rights violations. Nowhere in this does it talk about morality and where the money from, for LIV golf events comes from. It doesn't go into any of that stuff. And for all the people that stood by the PGA Tour, who I'm sure and I'm just taking this as an example, if Jordan Spieth had wanted to join LIV, there would have been a fat 8 to 9 figure check waiting for Jordan Spieth, and he didn't. And Rory McIlroy and all these other guys.
And we know that they basically offered Tiger $1 billion, and he said no.
It was just enormous amounts of money, and they all said no. And now essentially what you're going to do is say, yeah, you know what? The guys who did take the money, they're going to be able to sit there and keep it. The Mickelson, was reported around $200 million. Koepka and Bryson DeChambeau north of $100 million. They're going to be able to keep that. They've played in their major championships, which I personally don't think. I don't have a problem with guys who had qualified for tournaments to be able to play in tournaments they had qualified for. To me, that was fine. The world ranking issue that I've talked with you guys about, that's going to go away because they're going to be able to play in regular PGA Tour events. They're going to be able to play DP World Tour events. They'll be able to play majors. That whole thing is now by the wayside. And yeah, it's basically LIV wins. The public investment fund and the Saudi government win. And how Jay Monahan tries to spin this. He was asked about this on CNBC when he did an interview earlier today with the announcement. And boy, did he dodge that question like I would have dodged Mike Singletary back in the day on a crossing route. I mean, he just wanted nothing to do with that. And they are going to dance around that. And they're going to say, we're not talking, we're all looking forward. Let's look where we are. We're going to be 5 or 10 years from now. And they want nothing to do with those questions.
Because he works for the Saudis now. And they all do, whether they like it or not. And I'm curious, how does it make you feel as a fan of the game, as someone who plays, for someone for whom golf is important to you? And I was just talking to Lawrence about the first hour of our show. I was talking about what it's meant with my son and still with my dad and what just being on the golf course can mean. I know I'll get over it, but it doesn't. It just feels kind of gross now.
Well, so my son Charlie's graduating from high school a week from tomorrow, and he's going off to college. And you pass along these like little tidbits of dad wisdom that you try and I got plenty from my dad, and one of the ones that I will not be able to pass on to him is that good people can't be bought. That basically what the realization, whether I want to really stand up for it or not, is that pretty much now you can be assured everybody, damn near everybody, has a price. We know Jay Monahan and the PGA Tour got their price, and they were saying one thing, but eventually what came out was that Monahan and the head of basically the public investment fund and LIV played golf in London a couple weeks ago, and they hashed it out and they worked up a deal. And as he goes off and starts his journey and what he wants to do, just understanding that a lot of times like making the morally right call is great. And you can listen to people talk about that kind of stuff until they're blue in the face. And then they go to the bank and cash the check. And that's disappointing.
I'm glad you said that. We had Jason's high school graduation party on Sunday, and we're already talking about. He's like, "How am I to get my clubs to school? Because I want to make sure I can play." It's like it's only $300 if you want for unlimited. I'm like, fine, whatever. And to me, it's all about these lessons from the youngest ages of repair your ball mark, repair your divot, don't step on someone's line. If there's an extra stroke,
look somebody in the eye
and shake their hand. Yes, and if you took an extra stroke, you self-report, you sign your scorecard. And I know a lot of that stuff people find cheesy and elitist and quaint, but there was a structure to it and an idea of taking care of the course and taking care of others and the way you carried yourself that made golf really nice for a parental relationship.
It's not something. So Rory McIlroy is playing. I don't know if he's still in. I haven't even checked to see if maybe he even withdrew because he's probably so disgusted with this. He's the defending champion at the Canadian Open this week, and next week we'll be in Los Angeles for the U.S. Open. And you get this news today, and how Rory isn't absolutely reaching through the phone and choking Jay Monahan right now, I don't know. He has got to be so disgusted. And I think just fatigued and just mentally and emotionally probably wiped out by hearing this. He'll say all the right things. In as far as he is not going to say if he plays poorly this week or at the US Open that this news and this announcement had anything to do with that, but he's human. This has been something that he has been the leader of, and I don't know if he's going to win the US Open or not. I have no idea. But the talk of this tournament coming up, the third of our 4 major championships this year, going to Los Angeles, glitz, glamour, all that kind of stuff. LA Country Club is an amazing track. The story is now going to be this news dump here about the DP World Tour, the PGA Tour, and PIF forming a now still not yet named new entity and I have to hold down the vomit every time, to grow the game, please. So it's going to be crazy.
Have you gotten any indications from fans on how they feel about this, if it matters to them at all?
So social media can be a really tricky area to
Absolutely.
sort of gauge it. I avoid, I'll be honest with you, on days like this, I come back 48 hours later when the real rabble is sort of left. Randall Chambly at Golf Channel is going to be taking a hell of a beating today on social. If I were him, I would throw my phone into the river. I wouldn't even look at the thing, because he's going to get I think that the average fan breaks down into a couple different categories. There are a lot of fans that don't know and don't care. My father-in-law, I think he loves golf. He every once in a while will ask me, like, what is this LIV thing all about? Like, why isn't Brooks Koepka playing this week? And I sort of give the explanation of what's going on. And then there's some fans who are now aware of it because they're used to looking and seeing, where's Bubba Watson? Where is Phil Mickelson? Why can't I see, Ian Poulter playing this week, when they're playing at Bay Hill? And they sort of understand how that goes, and they've sort of followed. And then you get the people who are really staunchly supportive, frankly, of LIV Golf and everything that it stands for. In their mind, it has always been about what it means to be an independent contractor, to being able to be your own boss, to being able to take money from this. And they don't have a problem with where the money comes from. Their point of view is that, look, if I'm talent, I should be able to go and take my talent wherever I choose. And that's their side of the argument. I think that most people fall into one of those 3 categories. And now, a year from now, it'll all be the same, and all that'll go away. What I'll be fascinated to see is what's going to be the interaction of the players. If there's going to be a level of smugness, at the US Open or at the British Open, when some of these guys are walking around and, they're looking in their wallets and they're seeing those tens and hundreds of millions of dollars from LIV, and looking at the other guys and thinking to themselves, like, he was a sucker. He could have taken the money. Here we are a year later. Yeah, you know what? There were a couple awkward press conferences I did. Yeah, I caught a little bit of flack from here and there. But you know what? 18 months later, I've got my PGA Tour card back. I'm back to winning ranking points. And my accountant is telling me that me and anybody related to me is never going to have to work a day in our lives. And it was worth it.
Yeah, I think of Harold Varner. Wasn't Harold Varner the one who said, look, I had to take this money?
Yep.
And he said, look at where I am relative to the tour. Look at the number of tournaments in which I'm competitive. Look at my age. Mm-hmm. And he was one of the more honest players, and just said, look, I took the money.
Yeah. And there are certain players that are looked at, I think, in a much better light by the PGA Tour players that are out there. I was at the PGA Championship in Rochester a couple of weeks ago. Nobody's begrudging or angry at Brooks Koepka. Really, I didn't see Dustin Johnson all that much, a little bit, but I don't hear guys like, ripping Dustin Johnson on the range or in the locker room or anything like that. Everybody's always liked Harold. Gets along with everybody. There's nothing. I've played golf with the guy. There's nothing not to like about Harold Varner. And people will get that one. Where it got personal, where the barbs went back and forth, Patrick Reed, to some degree, Phil Mickelson, certainly recently has been strutting around and stuff like that. Those relationships, time can heal a lot of wounds, but it's going to take a while. So that's what I'm going to be looking at, is that, like, what happens if Patrick Reed and Rory McIlroy are paired in some, for example, at Riviera next year, because Reed gets his world ranking points and he gets his stuff back, and all of a sudden, like, those are going to be the weird ones. Eventually things sort of settle to wherever they're going to settle, but some of those relationships may be irreparable at this point.
David, this is great. Appreciate it much.